back to Inner Light, where we dive into soul led conversations that spark awakening. Today, we are joined by Taryn Voget, founder of the Genius Lab and a true guide for uncovering the brilliance that lives at the intersection of intuition, power, and purpose. She is here to explore something radically refreshing. What if your genius isn't just mental, but spiritual? What if awakening your brilliance is actually your path to awakening? Period. So, welcome to the show, Taryn. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
hmm So, Taryn, most people think of genius as something you're born with or something very intellectual. How do you define genius through a spiritual lens?
That's such a great question. And it's deeper than you might think. For the longest time, I thought the same thing. I thought, oh, you can measure genius on a test, and it is something that you just have. But about 15, maybe 20 years ago now, I started the Genius Lab where I was really interested in how genius actually worked. And I wanted to figure out how to reverse engineer how great people do what they do. And in the process of deconstructing or unpacking how real geniuses think, I discovered something really interesting, which is that, first of all, genius is a very loaded term. And so people think, oh, that person's a genius. And the challenge with that term is that you have to feel like you're a genius all the time in all things. But here's the truth. I think that everybody is born with a genius. And what I mean by that is something that we're uniquely gifted at, or our soul has a unique soul signature to express. So everybody has a genius. Now, not everybody does something with that. The way that we express our genius is through passion. That is really the soul's way of saying, go do this thing that you have an interest and excitement, curiosity, or a passion about. And when you develop that, that is what I call the process of geniusing, meaning I've never in all my years met somebody who was just born innately excellent. It was something, a gift that they had that they practiced and they honed and they focused over time. And I call that process geniusing. And then ultimately, after a certain point, when you've gotten really good because you've been doing something for a long time, it might look to the outer world like genius or like you are a genius. So it's really a question of how you use these terms. But I think that genius is really a deeply spiritual practice because it really is about connecting with that unique soul imprint and that unique soul signature, and then taking that through our passion and our excitement and expressing it in the way that only we can express it. So that's my thought on genius.
hmm That makes so much sense. And has there been a moment in your life when your own genius surprised you?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, actually, there's been a few moments, and sometimes it's in the moment you're like, wow, that was really good. What I've discovered about genius is that people think it's intellectual. But here's the truth. It's really the question of where do ideas come from? A lot of people think ideas come from the mind, but that's actually not what I've discovered, and that's not what's true. Ideas live in the quantum field, meaning there is a field we live in that's the field of all possibilities, all realities, and we live in that field. And what happens when we get an idea is we're tapping into the field, and our mind receives the idea through our intention. And then we take action on it. And that is kind of the whole process of geniusing. But genius is really what I call channeled. And so when you ask me, does something that, like, have you done something where genius has surprised you? It's like those moments where you just kind of step outside yourself and something comes through you where you think, oh man, that was good. I don't even know where that came from. And that happens to me on a fairly regular basis. Actually, probably the coolest example of that is when I founded the Everyday Genius Institute many years ago. I was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge, not thinking about anything other than I was interested in starting something new, a new business that would be something no one has ever done before. And I hadn't really come up with the idea, but I was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge one day and it literally felt like a flash of lightning hit my head. And I saw the whole idea for the Everyday Genius Institute, what the name was, how to do it, what it would look like, what the products would be. And I was like, wow, where did that come from? Because it was not my mind coming up with it. It was literally like a download from the universe. And that was probably the most dramatic example of that. But there's so many small moments where I say something to somebody, or I don't know, the perfect words come through in a moment. And those are also just moments of channeled genius that something comes through you, and they're smaller, but they're still just as important.
And that shift from trying to be smart to be aligned is such a liberating journey.
Yeah, I think it is. And maybe you've had this experience too, where when you try to figure it all out, it's really stressful because there's no way that the mind can do that, right? It's really about living from a place of curiosity, joy, passion, excitement, and letting that energy move through you to carry you where you're meant to go and how you're meant to shine, and using our intention as the prism of focus. And when you kind of realize how genius works, it's incredibly liberating because you don't have to try so hard. You just have to allow more, if that makes sense.
100%. And you talk about outdated beliefs masking genius. Can you share a belief that once held you back and how it finally unraveled?
Oh man, I have such a passion around beliefs because I really feel like when we can shift them, our whole world changes. And so I think it's really about, let's just take a minute and unpack, what is a belief? Beliefs can be something that are empowering and maybe less empowering. So we can have really positive beliefs like I can do it, or I love people, or people love me. Like those are empowering beliefs. Less empowering beliefs are I have to work hard to make money. I have to prove my love to others, like, and there's millions and millions of beliefs. The challenge when we have a disempowering belief is our whole reality then keeps reinforcing that belief. But when you realize that it's just a belief and that you can change it with some effort, because sometimes really deep beliefs, negative beliefs want to hang on to us. And sometimes they use really crazy tactics like fear or yeah, these sort of disempowering messages that we keep feeding, like the belief keeps feeding us. If you kind of think of a belief as like this third party thing that lives within us, and you just realize that it's a game it's trying to play to stay alive, you really realize like the game of a negative belief is to stay alive by creating disempowerment and fear. And there's been so many beliefs that I've had that over the years I've really worked to unravel. Some are easier than others, but I'll just give you a handful of examples of ones that even just in this last year I've really been trying to change, and I've made progress on it. And the biggest one is that um I have to work hard to make money. And that's just been something I've carried for 50 years, of that unless I'm working hard, I don't deserve the money, which is really just a story I'm telling myself, a belief that's trying to stay alive within me. And so unraveling that and realizing money can come from so many places, and it doesn't need to come from working hard. It can come from working in joy. It can come from a gift. It can come from a million things. And the more I let go of that idea, the more money comes to me in these really weird ways that aren't me actually working. So that's probably a big one. I think another big one is that I have to serve others to be important. That's really been one that I've been letting go of. And when the challenge when you have that is that your life is in service to others, not in service to yourself. But here's the crazy thing, it's the paradox. When you serve yourself, in serving yourself, you automatically serve others. It really is the truth of it. And so by serving others, you're actually not really serving them because you're not serving yourself. So those are just two big ones that I feel like I've been unraveling lately, but I could probably tell you 1,000.
And those are great. And what do you tell clients who feel they're too late or too lost to rediscover themselves?
Oh gosh, there's no such thing as too late or too lost. Oh, no, no, no. No, 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 no. I mean, we have a long life, and it's really easy to compare ourselves to others that maybe found passion or success at a young age, and we might be 70 or 80 years old and it's just dawning on us. But what difference does it make when it happens? It's a journey of a lifetime. I personally believe we have lots of lifetimes. So this is just one. And I really see now more than ever, even just in this last year, people, especially in the later stages of their career, after they've had kids, the kids have left their home, they've had whatever career they've had, they finally are saying, I want to do what I want to do. I'm tired of doing everything for everybody else. And they're really reconnecting with themselves at ages 50, 60, 70, 80 to do that. So you're never too old and you're never too lost. It's just a journey. And so much of the journey is just in discovering who we are and what we care about, and unraveling things that aren't true about ourselves, and finding what lights us up and shining. So you can do that at any point on the journey.
Absolutely. And it's powerful to realize the old story isn't you, it's just code waiting to be rewritten.
That's a good way of saying it. I like that. It really is just code waiting to be rewritten. The thing with the code is it kind of has a personality. And so you just got to realize that that code wants to stay alive. It has a little bit of a personality. And when you can kind of disassociate from it, it's a lot easier to let it go.
hmm And what's the role of intuition in your genius lab process? Is there a difference between intuition and intellect when it comes to unlocking potential?
That's a great question. I'm going to give you an answer on both sides of that. So for me, it's a highly intuitive process to deconstruct somebody's genius. And gosh, many years ago, I actually went to shaman school to learn how to actually be a better intuitive because what I realized is I could actually get a lot better information if I sort of stopped using my mind so much and just let it come to me. So I really spent a lot of years honing my intuition so that when someone comes into my genius lab, I can really see the patterns beyond what someone's saying to me and what their real genius is, what their real gifts are, how they're actually doing something that they don't even realize that they're doing. So for me, it's a very intuitive process. There's also a structure. There's a very specific sequence of questions I ask and things I'm looking for. So it's both structure and intuition. What I've also discovered in interviewing people is that there's an intuition. When someone's really good at what they do, they actually are more connected in a way to their soul and their spirit, and they're more intuitive, which is why it looks like genius, but it's really a deeper connection spiritually they have from their physical human self to their larger soul self. And that connection gets made through passion and excitement and focus. And in some ways weathering hard things because it builds strength and resilience. And that's all strengthening us and strengthening our soul. So when you look at someone who's really, really brilliant, in some ways you might say they're more spiritually connected to the higher part of themselves than others who maybe don't feel as much that way. And that is where intuition really comes from. It's kind of like we connect into a higher version of us that has answers and we're just really good at listening. And so everyone in my genius lab connects into that and gets information that way that looks like genius.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And do you believe everyone has access to this inner knowing, or is it a muscle that must be trained?
Oh, that's such a great question. I do believe that everybody has access. I think everybody has access to eh, let me phrase that slightly differently. It's like this idea that um, there's not equal opportunity, and that's just not true because all of us within us have everything we need to be the best versions of ourselves. And sometimes the journey is hard, especially younger kids that come from tough situations, or events that happen that might be traumatic. But those are all opportunities for us to reconnect back to our heart and back to our love and back to ourselves and the best of us. And sometimes the journey can be challenging, but everybody has access to it. And I think where I get frustrated is when I see things like the school system not teaching or helping students in a way that really aligns them to their higher self and their higher purpose and their higher passion and joy, because it really is wasted genius and everybody has access to it. The question is who is actually believing in themselves enough and taking the action to connect in with that and do it. And there's a lot of stories that people carry of, I can't do this, I can't do that, I don't know what to do, I'm not credentialed enough, I don't have a background, I don't have enough money. I mean, we give ourselves 1,000 excuses, but that's all really they are, is they're just as stories in our mind. We all have access to connect into the best of ourselves, and that's a journey. And you might find it young and you might find it old, but that is the journey.
And that blend of listening inward and acting outward, that's where transformation lives.
Yeah.
Mhm. And you have worked with creatives, investors, healers. What do the most fulfilled people have in common when it comes to living their genius?
Well, what I discovered is there's really patterns to genius, and Everybody does it differently, but I'll give you what I call the formula for geniusing. And because I really think that genius is more of a verb than a noun. So here's the formula. The formula is somebody's operating from their passion, their excitement, their interest, their curiosity, whatever word you want to use, but that part of you that's pulling you towards something. And that passion, let's just call it passion, that passion drives a lot of things, but passion plus strategy, meaning how you go about doing something. And I've discovered there's sort of patterns within strategy, and that's a whole kind of deep dive. But let's just call it the how you do it, how you're thinking about it, how you're focusing on it, how you're approaching something, what you're doing. That's strategy. So there's passion plus strategy. And then the third element of genius is what I call channeling. And we just talked about that a minute ago, which is, how are you pulling in ideas, information, inspiration, flow state, all of those really great qualities that are a bit beyond the mind. So when you have passion plus strategy, meaning you're good at how you do it and you develop that over time, plus these channeled moments, when those three things come together, it looks and feels like genius. The challenge is really early on when you're learning something, it's really hard to have all three of those elements align. That's why genius is really about focus over time. The more you focus something, the better you get, the more you can bring those three elements together. And that's really where genius, looks like, or where it comes from, or what looks like it's made. I've done a whole bunch of videos on this on my YouTube channel to really explain kind of how genius works and how anybody can get better at what they're doing. Because that really is the pattern, the patterns of genius or the strategies of genius. And I just don't think you can have genius without all three of those elements really present. So again, it's passion plus strategy, which has elements to it. I just actually did a deep dive series on YouTube on that. And then the channeling. Um, and that's really how genius works. But again, early on, you're learning, all of that's not coming together. As you get better, those things come together more often and it looks like genius. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And is genius always big and visible, or can it be quiet and scared too?
Oh gosh, I think it can be all those things. I really like the idea of the everyday genius. I mean, the big mega geniuses are fun. The people you see that have Wikipedia pages and that are big personalities and big in the news. That's a really fun genius because I think it's really interesting how some people, get to that level. But I look around all day and I see just moments of little genius all the time. The mother that said the perfect words to her child in the perfect moment, or the waiter at a restaurant that just had immaculate, flawless service. And to me, that is just as important of genius as a big mega genius because it impacts the world that somebody is in. It impacts a restaurant, a family, a business, a community. And to me, that everyday genius is just as important as the big genius you might see on the stage. But the sad thing is most people don't see themselves as genius, even though they are. And the truth is, most genius isn't recognized at that big mega level. Most genius is very quiet because a lot of times what happens is that when people are really good at what they do, they're not seeking fame. They're just interested in mastering their craft. And so you don't see them on TikTok blowing up because they're doing the work, they're not promoting their work. And I often say that sometimes the big mega geniuses you see really have a dual genius. They're really good at doing the work and they're really good at promoting their work. And not everybody has that dual genius.
I love that. Sometimes genius is the quiet knowing, not the loud arrival.
Yeah, and it really is, it exists in everybody that has an interest in being good at something. I mean, that's really where genius lives. And it can
Mhm.
be like my sister Kendall is a fabulous chef. I mean, honestly, one of the best I've ever had the pleasure of dining her at her table. But she cooks for herself and her family. She's not big flashy at a restaurant promoting all this stuff, but I think she's every bit as good as a famous chef. But it's a quiet genius that she reserves just for herself and her friends and her family. My mother is actually the same way. I was just home for the 4th of July weekend. My mother is a gardening genius. I mean, legit gardening genius. And her gardens are just something you would pay money to see. But I was reflecting on it when I was home and I thought, oh my gosh, fewer than 50 people have ever seen her gardens. And I just thought that was crazy. She just doesn't, she's just not interested in sharing it. It's for her. She made it for her. Just as important of a genius. Now, if she was promoting it on social media or YouTube or in magazines, she would be a mega genius and everybody would seek her out, but that's just not her interest.
Definitely. And What's one way a listener could begin tapping into the genius today without needing a life overhaul?
I think most people are already doing it. I think the one way you can tap more into your genius is really asking yourself the question of, am I doing what lights me up? And if the and really from a place of a soul level excitement, because that is the foundational element of genius in my experience. And if the answer to that is no, then I think one thing someone could do today is then start really having an honest inquiry of, well, why am I not doing that? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's like, okay, am I doing that as much as I want to be? Am I really doing my passion as much as I want to be? Or am I saddled with a bunch of stuff I don't enjoy doing? And I just have experience with this, running my own business. There's a lot of it that brings me deep excitement and joy. And quite frankly, there's a lot of administrative stuff I really just don't like. And I've been doing this inquiry for myself of like, gosh, I really love these parts, but I have got to find a way to outsource these other parts because it is just not my joy. And it's taking away my passion from what I really want to be doing. And so, it's all a process, but I think that the honest inquiry is, am I doing what lights me up? And if not, why not? And can I move towards that? And if I am, how can I do more of it and un sort of offload some of the stuff that's maybe not bringing me as much joy and find a creative way of doing that. What I think happens is when people aren't acting on their passion or their excitement or their curiosity is there's a lot of, back to negative beliefs around, I can't make money at this. I can't just leave my family and go pursue my passion. I can't do this. I can't do that. But I think the way to think about it is sometimes it's really small steps. You might not be able to leave your job that's paying you a bunch of money to go pursue, art or whatever you want to do, but you can do it in small ways. You can do it on the weekends or in the evenings or in your lunch break. You can do things that bring you joy without necessarily overhauling your life.
100%. And if they meet resistance or fear, how can they respond in a more loving way?
You mean if they meet resistance, like internal resistance?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. And this is why I say passion is really a foundational element of genius. What happens when you start acting on your passion is that is a very high vibrational, light filled state. And what happens when you are in the light? It really shines a glaring light on the shadow. And so the more excitement that you're in, the more the pieces of you that aren't aligned with that excitement come to the surface to be dealt with. And sometimes that looks like negative beliefs. Sometimes that looks like fear. Sometimes that looks like self imposed limitations because it's the part of us that wants to stay in a lower vibrational state because we're comfortable there or we think we belong there. So when you're operating from your passion, it tends to bring up a lot of your stuff. That's just kind of how it works. And using that and understanding the mechanism and dealing with those things as they come up one by one is really the process. And I will tell you, I don't really know anybody who's exceptional at what they do that hasn't walked through fear after fear after fear and made it to the other side. So, and the fear is just the version of us that's trying to, keep us where we've been, not where we're going. And so I think that, back to passion, it really is where the greatest transformation and the greatest growth and the greatest success and the greatest joy all are. But it comes with a journey of transformation to really be in that light.
Mm-hmm. And that permission to begin now, just as we are, might be the greatest gift of all.
Oh, I think so. And I mean, I do think most people are actually most people are geniusing on some level at something. They just don't realize it because they've got a definition of genius that isn't what they think they are. And when you realize that, back to genius is passion plus strategy plus channeling. And when you're good at something, you already are doing all of those things at some level that you already are geniusing. And how do you take that to the next level? So it's not only begin where you are, you're already doing it at something. I mean, you're hosting this podcast. You are geniusing as you're hosting it. Every episode, I'm sure you try to make it better than the last. That is geniusing. You're already doing it. And I think most people are. And so it's just how do you take it to the next level?
Definitely. So Taryn Voget reminds us that our inner genius isn't a mastery, it's a memory, one that lives in the body, in spirit, and in our boldest sense of what if. Just light up the place within you that you have dimmed for too long. Tune in, trust your genius, and let it guide you home. See you next time on Inner Light.